Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Demand Justice and Deliver Change, a virtual community meeting hosted by Congresswoman Torres to discuss the protests for justice and where we go from here. My name is Jacob Randolph, and I'll be your moderator for today's community meeting. Before we begin, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items to ensure a smooth webinar experience for you all. If you, for some reason, lose access to the webinar, you can rejoin with the link provided in your registration email. If you would like to submit a public comment during the program, please type them in the chat box to the right-hand side of your screen. And please indicate if you'd like to get an opportunity to speak during the open forum portion of today's program. We will get to as many speakers as we can during this time. And just to go over a few bits of other housekeeping items, we do want to go over a code of conduct that we expect all attendees to abide by, just to make sure that we maintain an environment of respect and inclusion. And with that, here are the lists of the following behaviors that we expect and request of all of our attendees, and also the following behaviors that will be considered as, harassing behavior and unacceptable at this event. So just keep that in mind, when we do move forward to the open forum portion of the event. And with that, I think that we are going to turn it over to Congresswoman Torres for a brief moment of silence.
Thank you, everyone. And we want to be as respectful as we can. If you would join me on a moment of silence in memory of George Floyd, and out of respect for his family. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And with that, we would like to move to the invocation that will be delivered by Pastor Brian Kennedy Sr. of Mount Zion Church. Pastor Kennedy, you are live.
Good evening, everyone. Let's bow in prayer. Father, thank you for the privilege to come together and think about the things that matter in this country, things that are troubling, things that are good, and things that we plan to do to make things better. Thank you for the life of George Floyd. His life seems to be cut short by violence, and yet he lives on through the voices of people not only in America but around the world, and his memory will go down in the annals of American history. Oh God, I ask that you will encourage his family, comfort them and keep them, and remember those in Minneapolis and around this nation who are hurting. We need healing, and we need your healing touch. Guide our time today and use it so that we're productive, and so that we put some things in place that will last throughout not only this moment, but throughout the years to come. Remember our Congresswoman and all that she does to make our area better. We thank you for her. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Kennedy, for that invocation. And now we'll move to Congresswoman Norma Torres again, just to give some introductory remarks.
Well, again, good afternoon, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. I want to begin by sending my condolences to the Floyd family and everyone in our community who is hurting at this time. We had an outpouring of interest in joining this discussion, so thank you all for your courage and perspective in these very trying times. We're joined by more than 12 leaders from across the Inland Empire, including elected officials, community activists, education leaders, public safety officials, mental health professionals, youth advocates, and faith-based leaders. I want to commend their courage in not shying away from this difficult conversation at this moment. This is a defining moment of leadership and not a time to cower and stay silent. I want to acknowledge a few of those leaders serving as panelists. They are here to help answer our questions and address our concerns. Assemblyman Reggie Jones Sawyer, who is also the chair of our Public Safety Committee in the State Assembly. Fontana Mayor Aquanetta Warren, Montclair Javier John Dutre, Montclair Councilmember Bill Rue, and also Montclair Councilwoman Denise Johnson is with us. And Pomona City Councilman Robert Torres, San Bernardino County Board of Education Trustee Hardy Brown II, Community Trustee Joseph Williams from San Bernardino Valley College, Chino Police Chief Wes Simmons, Sergeant Tony Bolanos, he is a representative with PORAC, President Ellen Turner of Concerned Citizens for the Development of North Fontana, President Jeanette Ellis Royston from the Pomona Valley NAACP, Dr. Soraya M. Coley, President of Cal Poly Pomona, Chancellor Kim Wilcox, UC Riverside, Dr. Matthew Holton, Superintendent of Chaffee Joint Union High School District, President Grant Ward of the Sheriff's Employee Benefit Association, Tri-City Health Center, Tony Robinson, who is their Mental Health Services Program Coordinator and Chair of Tri-City African American Family Wellness Advisory Council. Veronica Kelly, Director of the Department of Behavioral Health under San Bernardino County's Department of Health. Mr. Lange Hemsley, a local student and member of my Youth Advisory Committee. Pastor Brian Kennedy, Senior from Mount Zion Church in Ontario. Reverend Sam Casey, the founder and executive director of Congregations Organized for Prophetic Engagement, or COPE. And the invitation to participate in this forum went out to everyone as Inland Empire residents. And we are lucky to have such incredible leaders from across so many sectors ready to help heal and bring our community together. The video that surfaced last week made all of us witnesses to a murder. I had to force myself to watch that video. We watched 4 men who were entrusted with keeping the community safe. Instead, they suffocated an unarmed Black man. And as the initial shock gave way to outrage across the country, we also witnessed something else. The county district attorney at a national press conference claimed there wasn't enough evidence to bring charges, followed by the coroner's report that came out pointing to all sorts of distracting issues, only to be refuted by an independent autopsy just a few days later. The gears of systemic racism were grinding in plain view for all of us to see. And the American people said no. In the days that follow, Inland Empire residents have stood shoulder to shoulder with demonstrators across the country demanding justice for George Floyd. The anger on our streets were fueled by hundreds of years of oppression and outrage, and it has taken its toll on our community. And we need to heal, and we need to come together, and we need to hear from one another. I can't tell you the number of calls that I received from seniors and people who are homebound, who are not able to join in the protest, but want to participate, and they want to show their support in one way or another. Calling me and calling my office is one way. And as a fellow American and as a mother of 3 sons and a grandson, I can't put words to how appalled I am at George Floyd's murder and the continued oppression of Black and Brown communities in our country. My deepest sympathies go out to Mr. Floyd's family, his young daughter, and loved ones for their loss. But the fact remains that Black and Brown people carry a separate burden in our country. It is a burden of never knowing if we or someone we know will be next. Because before George Floyd, there was Breonna Taylor. And before Breonna, there was Ahmaud Arbery. And before Ahmaud, it was some other mourning mother's child. Names like Trayvon, Michael Brown, Freddie Gray are much too familiar to millions of Americans, not because they were able to reach their full potential, flourish, and achieve something great for society, the American dream, but because they were cut down before they ever had a chance. Viewing the tapes as a member of Congress, as a longtime public servant, someone who spent 17 and a half years working as a 911 dispatcher for LAPD, someone with deep ties to the police community, I think those four men betrayed all of the good that I know about the people who protect our communities. Mama is an international word, often our first word. It should not have been George's last words. And as much as I want to say that these bad actors have been, these bad actors are there, and there are no others like that. There's nothing like a police officers, their bad actions are nothing like the police officers that I know. I know that there is a long and painful history that would prove me wrong. Black men are still 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white men. And 1/4 of all people killed by the police last year were Black, despite them making up 13% of our population. So it's long overdue that we acknowledge the horror of this situation. And the question for all of us today is, what are we going to do about it? Each of us has a role in restoring faith in our justice system and returning peace to our streets. The conversation starts with the voices joining us right now. This is a safe space to share our feelings and ideas, and we can only gain from each other's perspectives. In Congress, our caucus has decided that we would follow a lead from our Black caucus members on legislation that we would be moving forward. But I want our community's voice to be a part of that. And that's why my office worked so hard to bring us together today. Only working together is the only way to truly deliver justice for the Floyd family and for our community, and create meaningful change that ends the ongoing stain of racism on our society. Thank you again for joining me. Jacob, I'm going to yield back to you.
Great, thank you, Congresswoman, for those remarks. The first speaker that we have today, Assemblyman Reggie Jones Sawyer, the chair of the Assembly Public Safety Committee. Assemblyman, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. And I want to thank you, Congresswoman Torres. It was always a pleasure to serve with you in the California State Assembly. I see you're doing great work in Congress now. So this is truly good that we can get back together. Unfortunately, the circumstances are bad, but I know we'll get through this. And what I would like to just let people know, we're going to get through this. And how we get to the other side and what we do when we get to the other side will probably be some of the best work we've ever done on every level. Whether you work in an ice cream parlor, or you're in the halls of Congress, or you're President of the United States, each of us have a responsibility to finally take on racism front and center and really get involved in making a difference. My background, not only am I chair of the Assembly Public Safety Committee, but my uncle was one of the Little Rock Nine, one of the 9 kids that were integrated into Little Rock all-white Central High School in 1957. And I was born in 57, so I was born in the civil rights movement. And my uncle and those brave young kids, all 9 of them were like 15, 16, and 17 years old. And what those 9 kids did was they changed the way we went to school and education policy by just standing up and peacefully walking to school every day. Yes, it took court action, it took some legal action, Supreme Court, to make that happen. But I like to tell people a lot of times it just takes one person. It would have just taken just one person when that one law enforcement officer had his knee on that person's neck to say, that's enough, stop. It would have just taken one person when Rodney King was beaten to just say, stop, that's enough. And a lot of times it just takes one. My uncle once told me that when he was, during that time, President Eisenhower sent the National Guard down. And he sent the 101st Airborne to protect those young kids from the violent racist mobs. And one day he was left there and he couldn't get back. My uncles or somebody missed picking him up. And he was surrounded by 100 kids and adults. And they were screaming at him, they spit on him, and they did all sorts of vile things. And he learned nonviolence from Martin Luther King. And so he knew how to handle it. But one kid in the crowd said, leave him alone. One kid in a crowd of 100. And they dispersed. The next day, my uncle asked him, what church do you go to? I'll go with you. That was the most Christian thing I've ever seen in my life. You could have been hurt. And the young kid said, we don't go to church. I'm an atheist. He just did it because he was a good person. He did it because it was the right thing to do. And so we've got to get working with both law enforcement and the community so that we're all doing the right thing. And it only takes one person. It only takes one person to move this along. And I'll leave you with this because I think they had me for, you had quite a few guests they had me for about a minute. We're going to have a lot of legislation moving forward. I just want to make sure whatever legislation we have, and I'll give you an example. There's talk about defunding or reducing budgets for law enforcement. And I understand that. But as someone has said on the budget committee since I was elected in 2012, where will you redirect that money? Or will that money be directed to schools and education, to trauma-informed care, whether it be for rehabilitation? We've got to work so that whatever we do, or do we plow it back into departments? Somebody got to go on, somebody's cooking or something. We got to go back to, or maybe give the money back to law enforcement agencies so they can learn how not to racial profile, how racial diversity classes, or they can do classes of de-escalation of different activities. But we've got to be smart, and we've got to, most important, be committed to the cause of making sure we don't end up in this place again, and that we're moving ahead with policies and procedures that actually make sense. And most important, we've got to have some kind of partnership with both law enforcement, legislators, the community, and everybody, the clergy, everybody coming together in a safe place so that we hire the type of people that we know would do the right thing. And so that we can, like I said earlier, we'll never have this problem again. So I'm here to hear some ideas. Just be careful. I'm one of 120 people that can make laws. So you may mention something that I may take and make it a law. So think it through before you bring it forward. And again, I want to say it only takes one to make a difference.
Great. Thank you for those remarks, Assemblyman. And just as a reminder to our panelists, if we can all make sure that we mute ourselves to reduce the background noise. And with that, moving forward, we would like to move the floor over to Mayor Aquanetta Warren of the City of Fontana. Mayor, you have your 1 minute.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
I consider myself baby. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. I relocated from Compton to Bruce, Montana. I remember as a child looking at the television.
Mayor Warren, are you using an earpiece, because it sounds like you're talking from a faraway place?
Okay, is this better? How's this? Is that better?
Yes.
Yes, much better.
Sorry about that. I always consider myself a war baby. I grew up during the civil rights, watching on TV and visiting Birmingham, Alabama with my parents, with my grandmother and where they had come from. I was there for the Watts riot, standing on the porch watching them burn down our community. And I was there for the Rodney King verdict. And it all comes down to one item, and that is the ability to communicate and give a hoot about more than yourself. I'm just so hurt. Just watching the parents and the children and everybody really tearing their hair out trying to figure out what we should be doing. But let me explain to you. We need a call to action. We need to work very closely with each other, including our officers. I'm very proud of Fontana Police Department. In 2013, there's an article coming out tomorrow in the Fontana Herald just outlining how they sat down and developed a new culture in their department. And it started with their unit. And it involved integrity, trustworthiness, and transparency. They have been working in our community to get that trust out of our public. They did not want the stigma of being known as a department that had these types of issues. And since that time, they've tried to bridge that gap all the way around. The other part is we need a balanced approach. I know people are calling for defunding of the police department, but there's just that many people calling for more funding. And that funding has to include that training. But each elected official should be looking at their budget to make sure there's a balance, to make sure there's community programming, and to make sure that you are tying your program to educating our youth, as well as working with various nonprofits and other people. And then we need to really have community engagement, not only registering people to vote, but making sure they understand the resources that are available to them. And we need to work with our youth to have a career path. There's something about people minding their own business, having a job, having shelter, and having food that makes it less likely they will have to even be involved with it. So the call to action in our community has to be making sure that we get a piece of the action. I'm African American, I'm very proud of that, and I never forget where I came from, and I always try to help others. But we've got to do more, we've got to do better, and we are already better. So all we need to do is extend that better to everyone, not just one group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Warren. Next up, we have Mayor Dutre from the City of Montclair.
All right. I think I muted myself. You can hear me.
Yes.
Nevertheless, obviously the tragedy in Minnesota should never have taken place, and obviously tragedies in other parts. Racism has been deep-rooted in our human culture, and I'm a firm believer that as a population, especially in this country, we are a very diverse population. It is extremely important that all races understand each other, all professions understand each other. So I think what needs to happen is that I think police officers need to understand what the population they serve, what they go through, what their culture is about, and understand who they are, and vice versa. I think there's you have groups need to understand what the mind of a police officer is and what the police officer goes through to make sure they do a professional job in protecting the community. So I think we need more outreach between the police departments and the communities, so they both understand each other. They both understand the diversity, and they both understand the challenges of their lives and everything else. So I think I heard training, and I think training is really important. I think what needs to happen, first of all, it needs to happen is figure out what the policies are in the city of California in terms of police use of force. I think that's gone back and forth several times, but use of force, what is appropriate for use of force. But also there's going to be training where police officers, not just in the academy, but it needs to happen on a regular basis where police officers continue to go through diversity training, and also police officers need to spend more time out in the community with the population, both in their uniforms and perhaps out of their uniforms, so you can develop that relationship. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Jacob, I just wanted to note for everyone on the call, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of requests for us to look and review some training practices. And you should know that my office did invite post, and that's the Peace Officers Standards training that it oversees all training for California police officers. They were not able to, get back to us on time for this meeting, but, should we have a future meeting, we'll make sure that someone from their office is able to participate.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next up, we have a council member from the city of Montclair, Bill Rue. Bill Rue, are you on the line?
Let me unmute myself. Yes, I am.
Okay, great. You have 1 minute, council member.
I appreciate the opportunity to participate. I agree with what everybody said. I believe that the British philosopher Edmund Burke once wrote, "All that tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to do nothing." And I think that's what part of this is. For too long, people of good conscience have just turned the other way. We can't tolerate that anymore. What I saw in those videos, and you can hear my emotion there, made me very, very angry. Those are not the police officers I grew up with in this community and in this region. And I think for us to move forward, it's not just police officers. We need to start having a cleansing of the heart, start educating our communities, making sure we have ways for people to interact with one another. Because if every policeman in this country was doing the right thing, we would still have hatred and racism. And we're going to have to start working, each one of us individually, through our community groups, to educate people, to get involved in those community groups that bring us together, diverse groups, so we can begin to understand each other. I'm pledged to do that. I'm glad that in our community we have those opportunities to do that. In our region we have those opportunities to do that. So let's work collaboratively. Let's work together. Let's highlight the people of goodwill who are out there and hold them up as examples. Let's hold up the policemen who do good things. But let each one of us talk to our neighbors, talk to our friends, start putting down hatred. Let us no longer remain silent. Let us speak out. And I hope I did that in a minute.
Thank you, council member. Next up, we have Councilwoman Tenise Johnson from the city of Montclair.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with all of you. And I'm going to try to speak really quickly. There are some experiences that I've had, as I'm sure many of you have had, that have left us kind of disappointed in terms of how we were treated because of our appearance. Some of the things I shared at our last council meeting is that my son, who does not live in Montclair anymore, he was raised here and he knew how police are supposed to treat him, but in a different city, in a different county where he lives, he has been harassed unmercifully, and it is frustrating. But I think we need to be careful not to hold all police by the same standards of the Minnesota police or the police who do the wrong thing. Most police officers are good and they are trying to help people, and that is certainly the case with Montclair PD. But what we need to do going forward as people, we need to demonstrate what unity looks like. We need to demonstrate how we come together and work to improve our communities. Now is not the time for us to sit quietly and wait for everything to die down. Now is the time for us to step forward and talk about, what does unity look like? What do we want our community to look like, and how do we get there? While yes, there needs to be police training, but so every person that is killed has been killed recently. It's not by a police officer. Yes, we watched George Floyd be murdered by the Minnesota Police Department, but we also watched Ahmaud Arbery be murdered by a vigilante. We've heard in the past of Trayvon Martin, who was murdered by somebody who was a self-imposed captain of the neighborhood watch. So let's not say that it's all police. It's across the board. There's a lot of people who need to change their mind, and the way that we can help them change their mind is that we can show them how it should be done. And I think we can all come together and work together and make that happen. And I think I made it in a minute.
Thank you so much for those words, Councilwoman. We're going to switch up the agenda real quick to move over to President Coley from Cal Poly Pomona, just because I know that she has some other commitments, so we wanted to make sure her voice was heard. President Coley, are you on the line?
Yes, good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank Congresswoman Norma Torres for hosting this important event. And thank you to everyone joining this discussion today for making your voices heard and your presence felt. And I am so pleased to join with you this afternoon. And like many of you, my sadness and outrage are fueled by an accumulation of grief for all the victims over the many years. And I'd like to just briefly share an excerpt from a letter that I wrote to the Cal Poly Pomona campus community. I said, we cannot simply pause from our regular lives and daily routines to reflect on the lives lost. To be sure, in these fraught times, there is much that occupies our minds, and it can be convenient to conclude that such killings are awful, or to feel sympathy for families and loved ones affected, and then to resume our daily lives. But that is not sufficient. For many, these deaths are profoundly personal, acutely evoking painful memories of our own lived experiences and the emotions that are associated with them. We reflect on these life-ending events, faced with the harsh reality that it could easily have been us or those we love. And so in the words of Martin Luther King Jr., and they're so appropriate when he said, we will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. As an institution committed to educational opportunity for all, diversity and inclusion, and global and social responsibility, I take great pride in the knowledge that Cal Poly Pomona refuses to be a community of good people who exhibit appalling silence. And our students, our faculty and staff, as well as our communities, expect that our values, that is our regard for humanity and each other, will consistently be reflected in our work, our teaching, and our engagement with one another. And so as we gather this afternoon in this town hall, we must continue as a community to demonstrate, uphold, and advance these values now more than ever, so our words and our actions and deeds are aligned to truly deliver on the promise of equal and fair treatment and respect and dignity for all. I would also just finally like to share that California State University, as the largest and most diverse university system in the country, remains focused on educating the workers of the future. And one of the items before the CSU Board of Trustees is a policy that will require that every student enrolls in a course focused on race, ethnicity, gender, and social justice. So again, thank you, Congresswoman Torres, and thank you again for the community coming together.
Great, thank you so much for that, President Coley. Moving forward, and just as a reminder for our panelists, if it's your turn to speak, feel free to turn on your webcam for us. That way we can see you if you have that capability. Next up, we have a council member from the city of Pomona, Robert Torres. Robert, you're on the line. Councilman Torres, we're having
Yes,
trouble.
can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me? Yes.
You're on the line.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Thank you, Congresswoman Torres, for hosting this important discussion. On behalf of the city of Pomona, I want to give our condolences and deepest sympathies to the family of George Floyd. The incident that took place last week was unnecessary and serves as a reminder that racial injustice still exists in America. We stand in solidarity with the Floyd family and with all those who are fighting for justice and equality. As we move forward, I want to encourage people to express their views in a positive manner. I am grateful that the demonstrations in Pomona have been peaceful and non-violent. But one of the learning lessons we can take away is that we need to hire more police officers of color. We need to encourage the minority community to join law enforcement because there is a lack of diversity. Police departments should be reflective of the communities they serve. This is something that I plan to advocate for on the local level. Now, this is not to take away from some of the great accomplishments we have made, but it is obvious that we have a lot more work to do. If anyone needs assistance from the city of Pomona, feel free to contact me via email, social media, or telephone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. Moving forward, we have Trustee Hardy Brown II from the San Bernardino County School Board of Education. Trustee Brown, you're on the line.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and cut my camera on and thank you, Representative Torres, for inviting me here. I'm going to read my comments from my board meeting that I just had this week with our county board and just kind of walk you through my thoughts as I addressed our board. We represent over 33 school districts and 400,000 young scholars that are going to become productive adults, and they will add to the innovation of this world. Our goal is to support these educators as they inspire young minds to be the next generation of leaders, creators, investors, educators, and so much more. I want to first express my deepest sorrow concerning the current events impacting the lives of students, teachers, parents, and staff. We started out 2020 full of hope, planning, and all is up in the air. Our community was planning on promotions and graduations in college and life and planning. And COVID-19, this pandemic, started the change in their future planning, as well as it being a once-in-a-lifetime illness that's going to be taking over so many lives. To date, we've lost over 106,000 lives here in America, and over 40 million men and women are unemployed trying to feed their families. And all this happened within several weeks. And this is something new that everyone has to learn and be able to cope with. But as we manage this pandemic, the national climate of us versus them, which has been brewing since the founding of our country, decided it was a good time to make a comeback. I would like to acknowledge the fear, the pain, the traumatizing images to students, including my own daughters, who are there reading all about this experience. And to the business owners, until 2 o'clock the other day in the morning, I sat in my business lobby nervous, watching the several police cars zoom past my office. They were there to protect, I was there to protect our family, which we had built our family business over the last almost 60 years, where we collect the newspapers and the history of the Inland Empire, but not only that, but the resilience of African Americans throughout the world. And so for those of you who have lost your businesses, I'm truly sorry for that. But I want to say this, as the first African American to serve on the San Bernardino County Board of Education, I want to personally include Black students and their families in my comments and let them know that they stand on the shoulders of great leaders that have made it through troubling times. We too will see the other side. I acknowledge your pain from watching year after year images of people that look like them being publicly lynched in a new and upgrading fashion from the 1920s. I'm a student of history and I'm a researcher, and I've seen the violence that has been a part of our United States that dates back to before the Revolutionary War. As I collect these documents, and what I have here in my hand right now is a book. This is Alabama Code of Law 1855 original printing. And Representative Torres, I think I let you read this when we met once before, but as I collect these documents, I found many stories that will break your soul and make you think that all hope is lost. Bacon's Rebellion occurred in 1676 in the state of Virginia, and during that time, after frustrations of indentured servants, warring with the indigenous people of the time, there was a major riot that burned down the city of Jamestown. And from that event, the concept of chattel slavery was created, that Black people like myself were going to be considered law and property and slaves for life. The mindset followed us through the changes of government, additions of territories, states, the abolishing of slavery with the 13th Amendment in the U.S. Constitution. But during that time, as bleak as it was, there's always been people who chose, those who chose hate, and other Americans who fought for freedom for all. When the laws were created state by state, they said it was illegal for enslaved to learn to read and write and educate themselves. They still found a way to steal a book, read by candlelight like Frederick Douglass, and learned letter by letter. When I read the slave patrol laws, and that's in this particular book, I'm quoting this book. When I read the slave patrol laws of the time, in 1855, multiple states said all white male owners of slave must perform slave patrol duty. When searching from plantation to plantation, if you find someone not belonging there, you have a duty to punish them and give them up to 39 lashes, whips. I internalize the generational pain that nobody can comprehend. This trauma has led us through the Civil War, Reconstruction, night raids of the Ku Klux Klan, Jim Crow, civil rights to the current day. The term unlawful assembly is plastered throughout my history books, just as I see it on Channel 11, Channel 7, and Channel 4 today. But in 1777, I've realized something. In 1777, the state of Vermont wrote in their state constitution that all men and women are created equal, and that they do not support slavery. There were several church denominations at the time of slavery that would hide, and they taught the freedom seekers to be able, they wanted to self-emancipate themselves, to create a life of freedom for themselves and family. They helped them. They did this even though they were up against a system that did not recognize their humanity. The public school educational system was created during the Reconstruction period for all students to be able to grow together. Because of technology, the world is closer than ever before. And to be at home protecting ourselves during this pandemic, our students had to watch multiple stories again and again and again of a person that looks like them, not giving what we're taught in our classrooms, and that is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Parents and teachers had to try to adjust to teach the topic. They were also trying to grapple with themselves. We are all hurting together. Our mental health is being tested, and we have to figure out a way to come together just like they did in the past. I recently read an educational article, and here are my points that I want to add, is that they were looking at equity for all students, and how can we change this narrative? Holding ourselves individually and mutually accountable. When you see something, say something. It does matter if you're at the dinner table, in the hallways of the school, or it doesn't matter if you're at the dinner table, the hallways of your school, or outing with friends. We must combat racism, facing the biases that we have every single day. Ensure representation at the forefront. Look around your boards. Everybody here is elected, and they're running different systems, and they're running school systems. Look at your board. Look at your executive cabinets, your committees, at your table, your office for teachers, your curriculum. Who's there? Who's not there? Why? Challenge yourself. Care more about ourselves, and then create an atmosphere of empathy where we understand everybody's story and learn that we can grow together. This impacts us all. And regardless of our race, we cannot achieve a just society if we cannot all stand up and call out injustice when it's present. And I'll end with this by saying, we must teach like our lives depend on it, because they do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Brown. We're going to also break away from the agenda one more time. I want to go to Chancellor Wilcox from UCR to give his statement. Chancellor Wilcox, you should be live.
You're mute.
Oh, you're muted, Chancellor.
This.
There we go.
Thanks to Congresswoman Torres for this event. I think it's meaningful in many, many ways. The juxtaposition of George Floyd and the pandemic really drive some points home for me. Just think, it was only in March and April when just about every day in the news, elected officials were talking about what? Ventilators and the importance of getting air to people. Then we jump ahead a few weeks and we see George Floyd on the ground being suffocated. It's clear in America today that air is important for some people and not for others. And there's nothing more important for life, of course, than air. And so for me, these few weeks have really magnified what we all know to be the case, the rampant racism that is in America. And I hope that these events have helped for those who don't appreciate that reality. I hope the point has been driven home. There could be no bigger juxtaposition of ventilators and suffocation here within a few weeks' time. Again, I appreciate all that Congressman Torres has done and all that all of you are doing to help end this very painful legacy for all of us.
Thank you, Chancellor Wilcox, for those words. Next up, I want to move to Trustee Joseph Williams from the San Bernardino Community College District. Trustee Williams, you're on the line. Trustee Williams, you may still be muted. Okay, we will come back to you, Trustee Williams. Moving forward, we do have Superintendent Dr. Matthew Holton from the Chaffee Joint Union High School District. Superintendent Holton, you're on the line.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Congresswoman Torres, for genuinely caring. And you're always just so connected to this community. So we appreciate that. And also, as others have shared on behalf of the Chaffee District, and we have two board members on the line, Sue Ovitt and Gilson Dejas, our condolences go out to the George Floyd family. There are a number of you on this call whom I have watched lead during this time, and I want to thank you for your example as well. The Chaffee District is 11 high schools, Rancho Cucamonga, Montclair, and Ontario for the most part, parts of Fontana and Chino and Upland, and we have 24,000 high schoolers in our immediate area that go to our schools. And boldly speaking, I sincerely believe that our schools will never be the same after these incidents and these recent protests, and that's certainly not a bad thing. For high school students right now, this is heavy. And our students seem to be observing others to determine how they should act and how they should respond. And I will tell you, they are loudly presenting their voices on social media, and they're talking about injustices they have had throughout their young lives, and they are displaying that. And some of them are reaching out for help. And Congresswoman Torres asked, before the meeting, what are we doing with that right now? Because we're not in school. We do have summer school right now, but it's still all distance learning. They're not on campuses. They're not around counselors and our psychologists and so on. So thankfully, we are reaching out to them as much as we possibly can. We're watching for those who are crying out via social media. We talked with 34 students just through my office today that are reaching out, and that is unusual. And so we thankfully have the South Coast Counseling Services who are providing free counseling at no cost for any of our students during the summer, and that's helpful. But I guess for us, this allows us time before the school year starts to prepare for our students' return, and to prepare for opportunities for them to engage in conversations and with speaking with other groups and so on. We are going to audit every one of our schools. We also on staff is Dr. Kennedy, Lynn Kennedy, whose other job is being the Mayor Pro Tem of Rancho Cucamonga, but she's our Executive Director of Equity and Inclusion, and she will be out and about and working with our staff to help them. But as already has been mentioned, equity in curriculum and making sure that our students have a safe place to attend school. And just a final note to Assemblyman Joan Sawyer, if you're up for a new law, perhaps it could be mandated that all teachers and students receive education on social justice and cultural sensitivity and biases. And if we are able to move in a direction where high schools have such an impact on kids in this time in their life, perhaps that might be something we could look at. Thank you.
Matt, before you go, I do want to just reach out and say that if there are specific programs that we need to look at to plus up funding for mental health, for counseling or those specific needs that the students need, please let us know. In my office, my legislative team is very proactively working on those issues right now to identify those issues for funding.
Thanks so much, Congresswoman.
Thank you, Superintendent Holton. Next up, we have Sergeant Grant Ward, the president of the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Employees Benefit Association. Sergeant Ward, you are on the line.
Good afternoon, everybody. So yes, my name is Sergeant Grant Ward, or just Grant, but I'm the elected voice for the men and women behind the badge. I do not speak for the sheriff. I don't speak for the sheriff's department. I was elected by the police officers, the individual deputy sheriffs, well, actually all law enforcement for San Bernardino County, which includes the probation officers, probation corrections officers, our welfare fraud investigators, our coroner investigators. That's who elected me to be their voice. And from there, I'm also on the board of directors for PORAC. So I'm not sure if Tony's going to make the call today, but I also do sit closely on the board of directors for PORAC. And I am also the president of SCALE, the Southern California Alliance of Law Enforcement. And yeah. I'll say now, everybody on this call has hit the nail on the head. Every single person, every person on this panel is hitting points that absolutely resonate with myself and with police officers everywhere. It really does. And although I only know a couple of you, I love and appreciate every single one of you, because what you're doing in the community is far above and beyond what the average person is doing. So with that, I mean, if everybody in our communities thought like everybody on this panel, I wouldn't have a job. I would have been an airline pilot and I would have been happy this week, but instead I'm here. and I'm telling you, the frustrations that we do share. What happened to George Floyd was outrageous. It was criminal. It needs to be dealt with swiftly and within accordance of the law. That's why we have the law. The difference between the law or not the law is anarchy, right? And what we have right now is a breakdown in society where lawlessness has taken over a big portion of our communities and is broken out to anarchy. So without the law enforcement, what you have is the constant fear from everybody and not being able to go. I tried to get lunch for my daughters yesterday at restaurants. I had to go to 3 different cities to find a restaurant that was open because they all close themselves because they don't feel safe. And I don't blame them one bit. I will tell you from a personal experience, my wife is a business owner. And by the way, my kids are biracial. So just putting perspective that I'm a person just like everybody else here. My wife's business has been broken into 4 times in the last month. 4 times in the last month. And that's before all the riots of what's going on right now. All right. So society has problems beyond what just happened in Minnesota last week. Society has problems. It's breaking down. Our laws are not effective because our law enforcement officers are not being able to enforce laws, or laws are being watered down to the point where nobody's held accountable. So you have these things that are happening within our communities that absolutely need to be dealt with, because every person that's sitting on this panel and every person that's listening to this call has the absolute right to feel safe in their own home. And every person on this call that's listening in right now has the absolute right to voice their disgust when something egregious happens. So from a law enforcement perspective, from a guy that's 22 years as a deputy sheriff and moved from detective sergeant and all that fun stuff, everybody has a right to voice their opinion, and every police officer wants to support that right that we all have. I will tell you that the thousands and thousands of men and women in this country have lost their lives fighting for the right to have free speech and say what is needed when things are wrong. And this was egregiously wrong. What happened to George Floyd was egregiously wrong. And yes, so my condolences goes to his family and loved ones. Absolutely. How do we prevent this in the future? We educate two parts. One, we educate our legislators, because oftentimes legislation is coming out that's actually harmful to the citizens that we serve. And two, we educate the public along with our police officers. Okay, so when I hear examples for when police officers killed somebody for no reason or simply because of their race, I know that there's actually a deeper dive into that. Something happened that led to the ultimate conclusion that someone lost their life, or not just, maybe not even just lost their life, but perhaps were treated indifferently. Well, I'll tell you something. When police officers are called to a location, it's because things have lost control to the point where whoever was at that location couldn't handle it on themselves. And so they needed to call the police so the police can come handle it, okay? Well, now the police officer gets there. And the police officer job is to chastise people, just like your parents chastise you as a child, right? They may spank you, they may take you to jail or put you on timeout. They may do that, but the police officer doesn't have the benefit of your parent, which is to spend the rest of their life nurturing and educating and caring for you. So our law enforcement officers have the punishing role of what a parent does, but none of the follow through that actually lets you know that the parents care or the police officers care. We absolutely care. So with that, how do we deal with the inherent racism or the illusion of racism or possibly the actual racism? When we identify police officers that have no business being police officers, we need to be able to get rid of them. We have to be able to do, and I am the union president, and I'm telling you that we need to be able to get rid of them. There's got to be processes and protocols where those that are being accused of wrongdoing have the same rights of the same people that we're taking to jail every single day. They need to have appeals, they need to have their voices heard, and in the end, if they don't cut the mustard, if they don't do their job correctly, they need to be gone, all right? We need that in our law enforcement. We also need legislators that understand the perspective of what's going on. I can honestly talk for the rest of the afternoon, and as every speaker's going up, it makes me want to first give them a big hug, and then second say, yes, totally agree. We need to fix those issues. How can we fix them? Well, you know what? Mr. Brown hit a whole lot of points on the head just a minute ago, and that's a lot of it. Educating everybody, but recognizing that your police officers are people too, individual lives that just chose a profession to serve their community. But unfortunately, we are vilified for a lot of things that we're forced to do. So I'm passionate about a lot of things that I do. I'm absolutely receptive to anybody that wants to speak at any time. Congresswoman, I appreciate the time. Everyone else on this call, thank you. Feel free to reach out, and we love and appreciate all of you.
Thank you, Sergeant Ward, for those comments. Next up, we have Chief of Police from the City of Chino, Wes Simmons. Chief Simmons, you are on the line.
Thank you very much. And first, I want to start off by saying, just on behalf of the men and women of the Chino Police Department, I want to publicly reiterate that we condemn the unjustifiable actions of the officers who took George Floyd's life. We've talked about this as a department. When this video came out, we talked about it as a command staff. We shared it with all of our line level officers. We engaged in discussions reference this. These actions are completely against our core values, the law enforcement code of ethics, and the law. And my statements are not unique, as you've heard. Law enforcement professionals from around the country have universally spoken out about this. We take our roles as guardians of our community seriously, and I'm so proud of the vast majority of police professionals who selflessly serve every day with dignity and respect. And the speakers before me have acknowledged that. But this does not make us ignorant of the real issues we are facing as a country and the fact that some officers continue to violate the law and the community's trust. And when they do, they must be held accountable. In California, I think we've made strides as departments and legislature with implementing body-worn camera programs, and now how we're releasing those videos directly to the public. So it's no longer what we said or they said. People can see those things for themselves. And we also must continue to partner with our local pastors. We're together in Chino. We trained all of our personnel on procedural justice and implicit bias, utilizing our pastors to help carry that message and bridge that community. And I agree with the comments of the need for engaging our community, but especially our youth. They're our future. And it makes me proud to see so many of them out there peacefully protesting. They're doing their job. They get it. And in Chino, Corporal Ryan Tillman has developed his Breaking Barriers United program, where he's working to prepare the bond between law enforcement and the community across the country, especially the youth. And I implore you to check out Corporal Tillman's work. It's incredible. And then just today, I had lunch with 4 of our newest police cadets. Now, these are 18 or 19-year-old young men and women who want to be a part of law enforcement in a couple of years, but they're starting their career at the bottom of the organization. And I'd like to say that all 4 of them are minorities and half of them are young women, which in of itself is a change from several generations ago. And when I engage these 4 young people about the video of Mr. Floyd's death, they readily express their condemnation of this, and without any prompting from me. They get it, and that's going to be the change. I implore everybody on here, do your part. Encourage young people who want to make a difference to join law enforcement. That's how we're gonna change this, and we're gonna make a difference. So again, Congresswoman Norma Torres, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. I appreciate all that you do in our community, and I've taken a lot of notes. I'm going to continue to listen and hear what people have to say.
For everyone on the call, I just want to highlight that Chino is very unique in a way that they not only recruit their police officers, but in the way that they grow from police officers from their community. They have a very, very aggressive way of recruiting police explorers. These are teenagers. And now you keep them on pay during that gap between 18 to 21 when they can actually become police officers, and encourage them to go to college and get an education, and while they're working part-time with the city of Chino. So thank you for that, and thank you for your partnership with my office when it comes to military academies, because it's not only about diversifying our police departments, it's also about diversifying our military, ensuring that, when it comes to sending, our young men and women to these prestigious academies, that they look like the community that is sending them, that needs them to represent them at every level. So thank you for your partnership in that. Your presence here is very valuable. I wish more chiefs would have had, I don't want to say courage, but, can you see you as an example of not being afraid to talk about things that make us uncomfortable, but facing the reality that we need to work together. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Congresswoman and Chief Simmons. Next up, I do want to go back to Trustee Joseph Williams. I know he got disconnected. Trustee Williams, you have 1 minute if you're alive.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, and I'm having internet difficulties. First, I just want to acknowledge the deaths and the families and everything that they're going through. Thank you to Congresswoman Norma Torres for hosting this. As a Black male, I'm angered by the situation that we're in. I'm upset. At the same time, I'm hopeful. I'm praying, but most of all, I'm taking action. My name is Joseph Williams. I'm a trustee with the San Bernardino Community College District. And, I believe as leaders, we move too slow on the race issue that is affecting the African-American community. I'm asking the leaders here to consider how we can better act on the signals and the drivers of change, and how we can do better scenario planning. For instance, we've been here before, and what would be the impact if our community centers, our churches, and appropriate facilities were open during the evenings, staffed with medical professionals and skilled facilitators to receive our youth, to help with, one, keeping them safe while we bring them together, but rechannel some of the energy that they have towards some type of constructive ends. They're searching for answers. They're acting out in ways that I don't even know if some of them understand. And so the thing that's not being spoken is when the verdict hits, if they're not guilty, we've been in that situation before and we know what happened. If they are guilty, we know that there's some other people that could be upset. And so how are we preparing? And we have to act in a different way. We also have to be honest about how our respective institutions and organizations are actively contributing to the problem and to the solution. And so, as institutional leaders, on this call, myself included, what I'm asking is we need to physically not rely on our staff. We need to physically walk communities, and specifically the pockets where Black people dwell, and look at what we see and see that as measures for how our organizations are doing as it relates to equity, and specifically for Black people. And when we say Black Lives Matters, we're not saying all lives don't matter. We're saying, hey, look, in this moment, we can't breathe. We're fed up. We're not saying, hey, we don't care about blue lives. We're saying, hey, in this moment, this is a jacked up situation that we're in. And when you see a paid professional take a life of a citizen, regardless of what the situation was, because the media doesn't tell you the whole story, you begin to think about how I could potentially be in that same situation because I look like that person. And the way that it's presented to us is like, I'm a target. I'm a target of these paid professionals that my tax dollars go, and then they say that these paid professionals are here to protect me. You're trained. You got to figure out a different way. You can't keep killing us. It's not acceptable. We can't stand for it. And so as leaders, we got to get in front of these issues, and we got to plan better, and we have to get out there ahead of these things because these verdicts are going to come. And what are we going to do with these young people? We got to figure out something. And so, I'm here to work. I'm here to serve. Congresswoman Torres' office knows how to reach me. If I can be of service to any of you, please don't hesitate. And again, I appreciate you all for allowing me to be a part of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Williams. I just want to assure the community members on the line that we will get to the public forum portion. I know that everyone, would like a chance to say something, so we're working through our panelists as quickly as possible. And next up, I know that he has another important commitment, so I just want to move to Pastor Casey, who's the founder of Congregations Organized for Prophetic Engagement. Pastor Casey, are you on the line?
Yes, thank you so much. I salute you and celebrate you, Congresswoman Norma Torres. I can appreciate the niceties that everyone has operated in. And it's troubling, some of the comments. I'm going to try to be as positive as I can because I'm angry that we've even got to have this conversation again. I can appreciate the niceties, but until we call it what it is, this webinar means absolutely nothing. And I've got to temper my anger because I'm the size of George Floyd, and whenever we get angry, we die. Let me also say this. Until we declare racism a public health crisis, we're not doing anything but just talking. And I call on you, Congresswoman Norma Torres, to work with us as a community to call racism a public health crisis similar to the pandemic of COVID-19. We didn't need COVID-19 to take us out even further. We were suffering some 400 years in this country under tyranny, the tyranny of racism. And it has only gotten worse with the more recent events. And thank God for the creation of social media and cameras on phones, because this has been happening. It's nothing new. It's just modern day lynching. There's a song in our history that in a poem that talks about strange fruit hanging from the trees. The difference now, it's knees on our neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And we don't want anyone to ever forget that. To the Seba president, I can appreciate your statement, sir. But the reality is whenever police is called out to people of color and Black homes in particular, it never ends well. The same call can go out to a white family and not receive the same type of engagement. Less likely for that young man or young woman's life to end in death like Breonna Taylor's. I want to honor and salute, and this is strange for me. I've met Chief Simmons, wonderful man. I honor and salute you, sir. And even the one you served up under, she was a wonderful leader and trained that department well. And I have every confidence in a chief like you, unlike my own in Fontana, who has not denounced the killing in Minnesota yet. It's your kind of leadership, Chief Simmons, that's going to bring, I believe, along with what the prior chief has allowed Orion Tillman to do, along with Pastor Jody Moore at the Transformation Church in Chino. I was at that very first convening. It's those kinds of engagements and dialogue that's going to change the narrative. But we've got to call it what it is until you're ready to call it racism and address it as a public health crisis, and also give the same resources that are into any other crisis. To this, we're not doing anything but talking. And I told Daniel, I don't know if you even wanted to invite me to this, because I'm not sometimes the one to come to these kinds of engagements if we're going to do kumbaya, because it's not kumbaya right now. Our people are dying.
We need you on this call.
And we need to call it what it is. So if you're not willing, Seba, the president of Seba, I'm sorry I don't know your name, to call it racism, then you're doing nothing more than protecting the silence, the code of silence, as the department and many departments have always done. Additionally, until we're really ready to have a real conversation about law enforcement in this country and changing the narrative, we've got to rethink public safety in this community. We've got to quit talking about tough on crime policies and blaming Prop 47 and 57 and AB 109 when there's not been one study or research provided that because of Prop 47 or AB 109 and 57 that crime is on the rise. And might I add, my daughter was shot by an AB 109 recipient on Mother's Day 2012. She's still alive, but I did not blame it on AB 109. I blamed it on a young man who attended a school system that failed him. I failed him. We as a community failed this young man. And until we're ready to really deal with it, we're going to continue to be at this time again, and we're going to continue to see things happen if we're not willing to address it. I'll close my statements by saying this. We as a community yesterday, the Rethink Public Safety Coalition, met with the County Board of Supervisors in San Bernardino, and we're currently working on a resolution that's just not a resolution where we stand and smile and grin and have a good time, but it's going to actually have actionable steps for the district attorney's office, public defender's office, behavioral health, and the public health department to work in a concerted effort to lead this region, this county, and ultimately the nation in changing how we deal with racism, because it affects us all. Finally, I am also a member, I'm a Baptist preacher, so I get at least 3 times the close. That's my second time.
That's okay.
Secondly, I'm also a part of the DA's Community Commission. Here's what you must stop doing, law enforcement community and President Seba, because the union sometimes is our biggest problem. CCPOA, Police Officers Union, Norma Torres, Congressman Torres can't get the work she needs to get done is because she's got to wrestle with unions who are paying off elected officials and paying off pundits and putting out a narrative that is not true. Case in point, as a commissioner, as part of that commission, on June 1st, 2019, I'm sorry, from January 1 to June 1, 2019, There were close to 31,000 cases filed in the DA's office. Only 19,000 of them, little over 19,000 of them were received. 15,000 of them were misdemeanors. A little under 4,000 of them were felonies, most of them general. I asked the district attorney, Jason Anderson, you can ask him for the records yourself. How many of these are violent offenders? And how many of these are created from gang issues? That we have the gang database that has been proven to be part of the racist problem. And what we discovered from the data, many of those felonies that were charged at that time were misdemeanor DUIs, domestic violence, and child abuse. Not violent offenders like you're trying to promote with Prop 47 and AB 109. Here's the issue. It's called racism. It's a virus. It's a pandemic that has been around. And I'm calling on all of our elected officials to stand with this community once and for all, and let's right this wrong today. Stand with us and call racism a public health crisis, and let us put the resources behind it to address it, from education to law enforcement. Thank you so much.
Just so you know, Pastor Casey, that is a resolution that we are considering in Congress, and we'll follow up with you to send you the details on that. We're not scheduled to be back voting until the end of this month. We are also talking about going back or having a virtual vote before that to take up some immediate items such as that.
And forgive me, I apologize for my anger. Sorry, but not sorry. We're tired.
No, we're all angry. We're all tired.
We're tired.
And we hear you, but I think you touched on a really, really key point, and that is the systemic problem of, you know, if we care about Black lives, we got to care about them from day one, right? The minute that they're born, ensuring that we're educating them, ensuring that they have proper nutrition, ensuring that they have access to healthcare. All of that is the inequality that needs to be addressed. Can all of that be addressed in the next, 160 days before, we have another election? I don't know, but we have to get ready for January when, we'll have an administration, hopefully a new administration, if not the same administration, but have a real plan in place to deal with all of these issues, not just police issues.
And
police
remember,
can be the catch-all.
The issue is not police. Let me tell you, had not the Lord snatched me at the time that he did, I was on my way to becoming an LAPD officer. Wanted to be an LAPD officer so bad. Yeah. Let me show you. I love law enforcement. That's not the issue. And it's not about one bad apple. It's not even about law enforcement. It's really about the seamless thread woven through the tapestry of this country's history called racism. This is
when our fellow citizens, when our fellow citizens are calling on us simply because of how we look, and their voices, they're believed before any of us. I think that that's important to address too, or that's another point that you bring.
And here's my close. This is my nephew and my 3 nieces. I don't expect to see it in my lifetime, the change that we're talking about. Yeah. But when I left, and I'm gonna try to say this without crying, but when I left my nephew's house on Sunday, he said, "Uncle, love you so much." He's 1.5, unprompted. It stopped me in my tracks. And I said, "Jackson, what'd you say?" He says, "Love you so much." I don't want this young man right here to grow up in a world to where he discovers there's a difference between he and I by the time he gets of age.
Right.
So I don't expect to see the change in my lifetime, but I don't want him to have to suffer because of racism. Racism is a public health crisis. It's not about just police. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pastor Casey, for those words. Moving forward, we want to have the additional voice of Jeanette Ellis-Royston, the president of Pomona Valley NAACP. Jeanette, you are on the line if you want to give your remarks.
Jeanette? Her screen froze.
She may be having connectivity issues. We will come right back to you, Jeanette, but we do want to move over. I know we have Ellen Turner, the president of the Concerned Citizens for the Development of North Fontana. I know I saw her on a little bit ago. I'm not sure if she got disconnected. Ellen, are you on the line? Looks like we are not able to connect to her at this moment, but we will come back to her as well. We did have a speaker from our youth community, Ms. Charlange Hemsley. She was a student on the Congresswoman's Youth Advisory Committee, and she was one of the Congresswoman's district office interns. So Ms. Charlange, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Jacob, and thank you, Congresswoman, for having me. Bobby Seale, co-founder of the Black Panther Party, named the programs that the party founded survival programs because they were tools to survive, but not a way to live. The ultimate goal, he noted, was for there to be no need for a free breakfast program for children because he wanted all children to not be hungry. He wanted there to be no need for a free medical clinic because he wanted all Black people to have access to affordable health care. We are facing the same problem that Bobby Seale described when we talk about justice for victims of police brutality in recent years. We are currently fighting for police officers to be removed from the force, but that's survival, an attempt to prevent more Black lives from being taken. We then fight for the criminal convictions of these officers, but this again is merely a survival mechanism. We must demand in 2020, an end to all forms of police brutality. This is the ultimate and most critical goal. Sadly, this is not a new goal, but as many of the speakers in this conference have noted, rather it's one that's been demanded by many civil rights leaders before us. But we have a chance to be the generation to make it happen. We must vote in primaries, but also vote in local elections. Interning for the Congresswoman last summer really taught me the importance of local politics and how they can really make change in our community. We must vote on legislation that fights systemic racism and vote for who, until we can bring an end to police brutality, will be responsible for prosecuting the officers that kill Black people. This means voting for a district attorney and state attorney generals, as they can shape how successful our fights are, as we currently are seeing in the case of George Floyd. But as also some speakers have noted before me today, change starts with everyone being aware and correcting the cognitive biases they have about Blacks. French philosopher Michel Foucault once argued that in doing so, we are doing the work of the state in our own homes. Police officers and citizens alike use out-of-place profiling to question and criminalize Blacks for being in places that we unknowingly aren't supposed to be in. People like Amy Cooper do the work of the state when they act on their cognitive biases, and they know that society also holds these implicit biases and call to wrongfully say that they're being threatened by a Black man. Carolyn Bryant was also doing the work of the state when she made false accusations about Emmett Till that resulted in his brutal lynching in 1955. We must not only demand an end to police brutality, but we must demand an end to the perpetuation of stereotypes about Blacks that cause their deaths. I know America can do better, and it must. It must for the current Black lives that depend on it and the future Black lives that depend on us not being perceived as a threat, a criminal, and a disposable being. I also want to finish by reminding us that although social media is a useful tool to share opinions, information, and connecting people, a lot of the information surrounding current events are fabricated or simply false. As you use social media as a tool to speak out about current injustices, please try to post and share information from only official sources or information that can be easily verified by one. Restrain from developing your thoughts and opinions on footage from protests that show only clips of things. Although I do acknowledge that some footage does show indisputable forms of injustice and violence, others can be very ambiguous and easily spun in one way or another. The best source is always the books from people who have been a part and have shaped Black history, and works by scholars who have documented and analyzed these historical events. Please don't forget about such sources as we all try to educate ourselves and better understand our current situation. Many people in this conference call have talked about implementing the studies of ethnic studies and social rights courses in our, high school programs, and seen it more throughout college programs. And that is something as an African American studies major, strongly agree with. This is one of the ways that we can start changing the minds and thoughts and perceptions people hold about Black people in America. I also want to thank the Congresswoman for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. It's been an honor to speak on behalf of my local community and the Black community as a whole. I also want to thank the wonderful staff of the Congresswoman who have worked very hard to put this program together for us today and talk about the harsh reality that we face today in our current country. I hope everybody stays safe and healthy during these times, and we all love on one another and seek to better understand one another.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lange. We appreciate those comments. Moving forward, I know Jeanette Ellis-Royston, I know you were trying to reconnect. Are you back on the line? Seems like you may, oh, we see you moving. Can you hear us?
Can you unmute yourself? Can't hear you.
You may be muted.
Unmute. Fine,
There
it's
you
green.
are, yeah.
Wonderful.
Apologies
Okay,
for that.
I appreciate that. I want to thank Congresswoman Norma Torres for this platform. I really do appreciate you bringing the community together for such an important, timely, unwanted situation in Minneapolis. But I do thank you as a leader, and I want to share with you that, and all those who are on the call, the webinar, it takes courage to do what is right. So I want to just say thank you so much publicly for doing what's right. It's taken courage. And I also wanted to get on really fast with Pastor Casey. I am not going to be apologetic because I'm angry. We as African Americans so often are labeled as the angry Black girl or the angry man when we share our frustration with racism. So I want to set the record straight now. I am angry. You do not have to label me. And I'm not apologetic about it as well. But I do want to share this, that in honor of the George Floyd's family, it is an absolute must that we, as community people, legislation, we must make sure that the 3 officers are arrested and charged. We cannot allow them to go free at all. We must, that is something we must push for in honor of George. I want to share this. There's hope. For the past 9 days, young people across the nation have been demonstrating, protesting their anger, rebelling, frustration. I want to share a little bit of hope, where I get my energy from today. I graduated from high school in 1965. I witnessed Martin Luther King being assassinated, murdered, call it what you want. I witnessed Bobby Kennedy being murdered, assassinated, call it whatever you want. I witnessed Medgar Evers being murdered in the front of his children in the yard of his home. I witnessed John F. Kennedy being assassinated and I witnessed Malcolm X. I was home from school. It was a president holiday. So I have that energy. I see where these young people are coming from. No, we didn't burn down Brooklyn, New York. We didn't do that. But we were angry. We were upset. So I don't condone actually the violence that they're doing in terms of burning down their neighborhoods and business. No, but we must as community people really pivot. Have we trained them to do anything different when these type of situations happen? We probably have not. Have we trained them? Have we talked to them before these type of issues? No, we have not. So that is something for us to look forward to. We probably need to have a conference on what to do how to protest fairly and safely. And do not lose focus of the purpose, because right now they're losing focus of the entire purpose. I also want to say this, that I'm also a commissioner for human relations appointed by Hilda Solis. And it is time for all community police officers, law enforcement leaders to come together and redefine community policing. It is not working. It has not been working. We must find a way to redefine it. I want to say this, the NACP National, they have given 5 points, 5 pieces of legislation that they actually would like for the local branches to push. I'm not going to read all 5 of them, but I will read one. We must add knee hole to chokehold piece of legislation in the state of California. We had to ban chokehold 10 years ago. We're right back there. Not with chokeholding, with a knee holding. So we must add knee holding to chokeholding ban here in the state of California. And as you know, not all of our nation has added chokeholding to their legislation. I just want to close by reading the mission of the NACP. The mission of the NACP is to ensure political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights to all persons, and to eliminate racial hatred and racial discrimination. That is our responsibility. So when you see NACP members actually addressing those issues, that is our mission. And what we're talking about today is institutional structural racism. It's structured. We're going to have to go to the Constitution, rethink. We have to go to the Constitution. I'm going to close with this. Martin Luther King quote, "The time is always right to do what is right." Congresswoman Norma Torres, what you did today was right. I want to extend this to everyone on the panel today. We must do what is right, and the time is right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ellis-Royston, for those remarks. I do want to move forward to our last couple speakers. We understand that, we need to have the mental health resources in our community to obviously deal with these tragedies over recent weeks and years. So we have Tony Robinson, the chair of Tri-City Mental Health Services African American Family Wellness Advisory Council. Mrs. Robinson, you are okay to give your remarks.
Thank you, and thank you, Congresswoman, for the invite. I want to talk to you today about trauma, okay? Yes. What we all witnessed last week was traumatizing. We saw a man begging for his life. We saw a man utter the same words that we remember from Eric Garner. I can't breathe. We all witnessed that. And as a Black person, witnessing acts of violence against people who look like you on a continual basis does something to you. And so every day we make the decision if we're gonna be numb to it or if we're gonna decide to feel. And for all of us who decide to feel, it's overwhelming. We are not okay. Our community is not okay. I personally am not okay. We are not okay. And I'm here today to say it's okay to not be okay. We need to voice that we are not okay. We need to talk to our friends about it. We need to talk to our family about it. And you need to talk to organizations like Tri-City we're here to help you when you're not okay. It was said earlier on the call that police are called in and they act as enforcers when the community can't handle something. And so they're there, but that's not always the case. We remember Freddie Gray. You can be walking down the street, end up having what they call a rough ride, and then not be alive to see the next day. So it's not always because police are called to the scene. You can be minding your own business, and we deal with that trauma on a daily basis. We deal with that fear on a daily basis. We deal with that anger on the daily basis. And so I'm just here to remind everybody that it's okay to not be okay. I'm standing here with you and saying, I'm not okay. And again, Tri-City, we are here. We have services. We are having webinars. We are working with other members of the community to put on discussions and talks like this so that we can try to develop a solution for wellness for the community as a whole, but more specifically for Black and African American people. And so visit our website. There's a lot of information that you can find there about community events that we're having. They're virtual right now because of COVID, but just another reminder, we're not okay. And I know that this is about George Floyd. That's what we're talking about. That's in the subtitle of this webinar. But we have to remember, it's not just George Floyd. But this is a pattern. And we're carrying this. We're carrying Breonna Taylor. We're carrying Tamir Rice. We're carrying Eric Garner. We're carrying Freddie Gray. We're carrying our uncles. We're carrying our cousins, our grandparents. This happens to us. It's just now that it's documented, it's more other people can see it. But we've known this has been happening for years, and we're carrying all of this, and it's traumatic. And so we are not okay. But please reach out to your mental service providers because we are here to help. Thank you.
Tony, if you would keep our office informed of these webinars that you have to help us deal with this trauma, we would love to put that out to our community as a point of information. Thank you.
I will definitely keep you informed of those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Up next, we have Dr. Veronica Kelly, the Director for the Department of Behavioral Health with San Bernardino County. Dr. Kelly?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Congresswoman Torres, for this opportunity. I want to echo some things that have been said here today. Racism and discrimination make us sick. And I mean that literally as well as figuratively. Both racism and discrimination increase disparities in health conditions. That includes mental health and addiction. They increase disparities in the ability for people to access those services that they might need. And it increases disparities in poverty. Both racism and discrimination have detrimental impacts on mental health in general. And it is really important to note that research shows that race-related stress is significantly more powerful of a risk factor than all lifetime traumatic events. Race-related stress. And that African American psychological responses to race-related stress is very similar to the general response to traumatic events. It results in anger, in fear, in depression that sometimes people misconstrue as being something else, in anxiety disorders, in interpersonal sensitivity, in somatization, so experiencing things in our bodies instead. These are real issues. And as my colleague from Tri-City stated, we have lots of resources that are available to the community at large. We have our crisis lines that anyone can call now. They can text those lines. And I wanted to also remind everyone that our services have been available throughout the entire COVID shutdown. They're currently available. We have continued to provide cultural specific services. That means race specific services as well as other cultures. And those services are focused on trauma, historical trauma. They're focused on strengths. So currently we have 2 providers, Valley Star and Young Visionaries, who are providing promoting resilience in African American children's program. And they're developing themselves programming based on the Black experience, not something that I've pulled from the elms of white research. That is important. And to address, Congresswoman, when you were asking about if there are resources for our kids right now, Terrence Stone is right now at this very moment doing that project and Zooming with our children to provide mentoring so that they understand how to handle the stress and the anxiety and the self-hate that they're starting to feel, that they've been feeling. Also, we are providing mental health first aid, and I know that Mount Zion Church has participated in that. And that is a way that we can train community members to address trauma and stress, and that is cultural based. And also, just a reminder, I'm not sure if Dr. Holton is still on the call, but we do provide, the County of San Bernardino does provide services, our student assistance program, to Chaffee Joint Union High School District through South Coast Services. And we're doing it now. What we found is during the lockdown, we have been able to Zoom and to FaceTime and Skype with our kids. And the added bonus is their parents are now available. Their caregivers are right there in the house with them. So we have increased all of those services. And also we have resources that are posted on our website. That's at SB for San Bernardino, county.gov/D as in department, BH for behavioral health, under announcements. It's at the bottom of the page. And we have race-related stress information there, as well as an amazing toolkit for Black parents to assist them in addressing these issues with their Black children, written by Black parents. So I would suggest everyone utilize those resources, and I can also, Congresswoman, make sure that you have access to all of the resources that we have to provide. And I thank you very much again.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly, for those race-appropriate tools that you have provided for us. We'll make sure that we link those links to our website and put them out for our community to share.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Next up, we have Pastor Brian Kennedy again from the Mount Zion Church of Ontario. Pastor Kennedy, are you still on the line?
I am still on the line. Thank you. What an honor to be with you all tonight. If you listen to everyone, it certainly is an honor to be with so many people who are on the front line trying to make a difference in different areas. We all have a responsibility to make a difference within our sphere of influence. And as we're able to partner with each other, we do it, but we must do our specific task. At Mount Zion, along with other pastors, we will continue our work with our law enforcement officials to promote positive policing. And one of our efforts at this point is to call attention to the change that needs to happen on the inside of police departments before things really happen outside. A lot is happening outside police departments, but police culture has to change on the inside first. And no one can identify a rogue cop like God and another cop. They know each other. And so we have to talk through ways so that law enforcement officials who are upholding the law can come forward and help identify officers who are breaking the law without the system turning on them, like one of our officers in Los Angeles and other examples of the system turning on people who are trying to do what's right. Thank God for Chief Arredondo from Minneapolis, who stood up as the top cop in town and said, you know what, their silence meant they were complicit. That was huge for him to say that, and we need to just all send him a note and say thank you for your courage to do what's right as the top cop in town. What a great example. And so we're working with District Attorney Jason Anderson. His office reached out to me to see how his office can support our efforts. And so I submitted a research-based proposal that includes our sheriff, and whom I'm good friends with, and police chiefs, and I know several police chiefs in our area, and political leaders like our Congresswoman. I know she'll support, she always supports, and other community leaders, so that we can talk about positive policing in San Bernardino County. And we want to talk about the specific things that different police departments can do to protect officers who come forward and deal with officers who are breaking the law. And what are the positive things our police departments are doing in the area of recruiting more people of color, pastors speaking at the training for officers. I've done that twice for our San Bernardino County Sheriff's Training Department. And so we're working on specific things to help the culture in policing here in San Bernardino County. And so as Jason Anderson completes his review of our proposal and we move forward, we'll let you know, Congresswoman Torres, so everyone on this call can get an invite, and we can move in a very specific direction to push positive policing in San Bernardino County, so that can help somebody else. There are small police departments, just like in Ferguson. There were 53 police officers when Mr. Brown was killed. 3 of them were Black. And so there are studies, well, you hire more Black police, and well, that may not help, that helps. And so we want to talk through, what does the data say? What do the studies really say? And when you get enough Black police officers who are active representatives of the community, then you see a change, not tokenism. And so we're talking about things that really work in policing. What are the police chiefs saying they're doing the right way to avoid public or police abuse? And what are the things they've had to do? Like our sheriff has had to fire sheriffs. He's had to make some real tough decisions. We were called in as pastors. He briefed us on what was going on, got our input, and made his decision, tough decisions. It's that kind of stuff that has to happen inside of police departments in order for us to experience the change we're talking about. So that's just one of the things that we have to do as pastors and community leaders, along with all the things that you are doing to make a difference. So God bless you, and thank you all for being partners in the effort to make a positive difference in our area.
Thank you, Pastor Kennedy.
Thank you, Pastor. Our final speaker is Ellen Turner. I know we tried to get her on earlier. Ellen, I have you as a panelist. Are you able to unmute yourself? Ellen, you can hit the red button on the top of your screen there to unmute your microphone.
Where?
Okay.
Okay.
Ellen, I think we can hear you.
Hi. Excuse me.
Live, Ellen.
All right. Thank you. This is Ellen Turner. I'm president for the no, I'm not. I'm president for the Conservative Citizens for the Development of North Fontana. And Thank you for having this forum. We work very closely with our city, and as a result of that, I think we have a real good open dialogue, and that's what we need to do in all of our cities. And I think it's not going to eliminate the problem we have, because it's a sin and a shame that we have law enforcement officers who are supposed to protect and serve, but they hide behind that badge of honor to be cold-blooded murderers. So we need to make sure that we keep the lines of communication open and work together with our city fathers, our law enforcement, and our community. And what we do, we have community forums, and the community forums seem to be really helpful in our community, so people can actually come out, voice their concerns, and we hold the elected officials accountable to answer those questions and to resolve the problems. I know Vernell is here with me, my vice president, and I know he had a few words he wanted to say.
Hello, Congresswoman Torres. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Just want to make sure you guys could hear. Not much more to add. Definitely appreciate this forum. Definitely appreciate all that everyone is standing for. We agree with all of the comments that have been mentioned already. And as Ms. Ellen Turner have already mentioned, we're embedded into the community. The Concerned Citizens for the Development of North Fontana is a 50-plus year nonprofit organization that we work with a lot of the communities, a lot of the community organizations that are out here in order to just help diffuse a lot of the issues that are going on. We do have a good, positive relationship with our city managers and officials and police departments. And as I mentioned, we do have other events that go on during the year to help connect our organizations, our community together. Some of the things that we're going to do real quickly that we'd like to do is just talk with some of our young people. What I have found in talking, as we talk to some of our young people, talk to some of the community of folk that my generation and my kids' generation and then my grandkids' generation, they all pretty much have different aspects, different thinking on what should be done and how it should be done. We recognize that this issue, this problem is not one that can be resolved overnight, but what we would like to do is just continue to dialogue with our community, and not just those, like I say, that are in my specific age bracket, but with all of them, just to get their ideas and their thoughts on how we can better come together as a community. We want a dialogue with our young people, with those even that have been through some of the other traumatic experiences. Myself, I'm from the Los Angeles area. I remember the Watts riot, but I also have a background with the police department, with armed forces. So I carry a unique torch with me in that I can, I kind of see from the inside as well as the outside. But I think just forces combined together, we can come together, become united. But we cannot, no longer can we just do the same thing and do this insanity thing, do the same thing expecting some type of different results. So we're behind you. We are going to do our part in order to help in our community as well as with the state of California.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments, and I'm really eager to open up the mic and hear from some of our young people that have been patiently waiting. So thank you all for participating. Jacob, can we open up the mic for some of our young people?
Yes, definitely. So if you would like to speak, you can raise your virtual hand through the webinar software. You can also submit written public comments in the chat box. And to accommodate as many speakers as possible, we will limit our public comments to 1 minute per speaker. So let's see here, our first speaker. I know we have Samia Alcom. Samia, I'm unmuting you. If you want to ask a question, you will need to unmute yourself as well.
Samia, before you start, I want to say that, to the rest of our panelists, I hope that you will stay on, but if not, I'm committed to staying on, for as long as we have people interested in trying to ask the question. So please go ahead. Your mic might be muted. Jacob? Jacob?
Congresswoman Jacob is having some tech issues, so I'll be assisting at this time.
Okay.
Of course.
Thank you, Sol. I think I'm back on. Apologies, our office connection went down for a second. So Samia's question or her comment was sort of to what Pastor Casey had mentioned. People are calling for racism to be considered a public health crisis in the county. She really wants to know more about what can we do not only at the county level but also at the state level and the federal level to really combat these root causes of racism in our community.
Right. From the point of racism, I think what was stated earlier about these are issues that are deep-rooted community issues. They don't only impact the police department. We see it more prevalent in the police department because they're sort of like the catch-all. We call them for everything, things that we should be dealing ourselves with as a community. Homelessness issues, those are all symptomatic issues that for too long have fallen by and have not been paid attention to the extent that we need to. Educating and providing training and cultural awareness, to our police departments is not going to fix the problem of racism in our community. Police departments are only, a small portion of our community as a whole. We need to deal with, identifying these issues within our communities and speaking out and addressing those issues immediately. It's part of our education system. It's part of our healthcare system, as I stated earlier. That's why, as we're looking at what kinds of fixes, can we put forward, what types of legislation can we put forward, we cannot do that, alone. We cannot do that in the vacuum of the halls of Congress or working through a virtual community meeting, with my colleagues. This has to be a community dialogue. This has to be about identifying the root causes. What are the problems? Because here in the Inland Empire, the problems that we have may be very different than in other communities. The issue of the chokehold. That is a policy that many of our departments don't even have anymore. It's a straight violation of not only department policy, but it's illegal. So when officers exercise that's they're violating their own department policies and the law in many of our jurisdictions. We have to pay attention, by the way. A lot of the problems that could be addressed here locally, as was stated by a previous speaker, deals with local laws and ordinances. Let me give you an example. I moved to Pomona in 1990. Bought a little tiny house, worst looking house in a great neighborhood, a little street. And here we are moving in, my husband, and at that time we had 2 sons. On that street, we were first Latino, family on the street, and we had a moving truck. We had a U-Haul truck on the driveway. Someone felt so strongly about us moving into, this beautiful street that they put into my mailbox an anonymous letter, and the anonymous letter contained old CCNRs that ban people of color from living north of Holt Boulevard. Now, that was very hurtful because I expected my neighbors to maybe say welcome to the community or maybe wave, or at the very least give us an opportunity, you know, to clean up the yard because the house was in really bad shape when we took ownership of it. But instead, that's how we were welcomed. But that same community, whoever in that community felt so strongly about letting me know that I didn't belong there, elected me to their city council, elected me mayor later, elected me, to serve as their state representative, and now sent me to Congress to represent them. So it's not all lost on, one bad apple. The fact that I did not allow that to identify me, or to define me, or to define the rest of my community, to alienate myself from the rest of the community. I think it's important for us to stand up for ourselves in a way that is constructive. And I think what we are seeing from our community, going out and demonstrating with our signs and shouting, that is okay. We are angry. We are angry about that, about what happened. We cannot stay angry. We have to provide some solutions, because our kids are watching, and many of them are here that want to participate in this dialogue and should have a voice in the process. This is their community too. These are their lives that are on the line, and it is our responsibility to help protect them and to help them grow in an environment where they are welcome and that they feel that they're a part of their community.
Thank you, Congresswoman. The next question that we have comes from Roman Gomez. Roman, I'm unmuting you. Go ahead and make your statement or question.
Hi, thank you, Congresswoman Norma Torres, for having me speak. My question is, understanding the long historical record of police brutality and the policing of minority communities as an institutional issue, what policies will you enact to address the police brutality and racial inequality in your district, considering that your district alone spends billions of dollars on the police force annually, while other sectors of the city's budget are barely given any funding? How do you intend to defeat institutional racism while actively supporting the policing of our communities that have a majority of Black and Brown population?
So at the federal level, I don't deal with the local budgets, by the way, how the local cities spend their money. They have their own elected body, and they decide where the money is going to be. At the county level, it's the same way, and at the state level, it's the same way. From a federal budget perspective, we send money to our communities to deal with issues that they identify. That's why I think it's so important, for young people and all people to watch and to pay attention to what is happening during those council meetings, during those Board of Education meetings, during those college board meetings. How is the money being spent, and why is it being spent in that way? As a federal elected official, I have been very heavily focused on funding our schools, our colleges, and our universities. That has been the brunt of our focus, certainly in this appropriation year and last year. And then looking at ways in which we can improve our infrastructure, focusing on housing, focusing on our highways, and our bridges that are, falling apart. But when we send the money from the federal government, it is up to our cities, our local elected officials, to identify how and prioritize how that money is being spent. And that's where you come in, as a member of the community. You should have a voice on how that money is spent. Look, when I was in the state legislature, I was so frustrated with, dealing with issues of public corruption. Every time an elected official or a public servant is involved in corruption, it is not them that end up paying for the bill or for the attorney fees that have to be paid to defend their illegal actions. It's often the taxpayers, people like me and you, in our communities that have to foot that, those bills. And when I was in the state, I introduced a set of bills that would address public corruption, as it related to public elected officials, but not them, not just stopping that. Most of the time, when we find out and when we discover public corruption, it is oftentimes long past the time frame that law enforcement or the district attorneys have to file charges against that person. So, long past that time, the clock has stopped and they cannot file charges on them. So what my bill did was it started the clock for them when they discovered the crime, not when it occurred, but when they discover the crime. And it allowed them an opportunity to not only file charges on that corrupt elected official, but also on the people or the persons who helped them with that act of public corruption. So we have to pay attention. We can't simply go to work or go to school and come home and vote every time. What does that show? The Voice, has great acts, and we want to vote on a song or a specific singer. Look, you have to vote. You have to watch your elected officials and make sure that they're spending money where it needs to be spent. That's one way. I'm committed in Congress to continue to support those issues that you as a community has identified that are important to us. When I first got elected to Congress five years ago, we put out a white paper, A Road to Recovery. At that time, we were recovering from the last downturn in the economy. And in that, we identified areas where we were going to work for and legislate on. Job creation, identifying opportunities to bring back manufacturing to the area. While the logistics industry is growing here, we know it's not enough, and those are not sustainable jobs. We need to make sure that we are growing jobs that will get people to the middle class so that workers can afford to live in the communities where they're working. And having 2 or 3 part-time jobs to get enough money to pay for an apartment or rent certainly is not acceptable. So those are the things that I have been focused on, and those are the things that I will continue to focus on the issue of relations with our police department. I've been very focused on the COPS programs, helping to fund programs that deal with identifying victims of trafficking, whether it's men or women that have been trafficked, for drugs or sex. Identifying very young victims in our police department, have been very proactive in that, and they've been working towards that, towards those goals. Another issue that I like to address, that I have been addressing since I was first elected in the Pomona City Council, that, by the way, it didn't make me any friends on the police department, and that was the issue of recruitment and training of young people that live in our community. For a long time, my home city, our recruiters were going to Oklahoma and other states to recruit people. And my question to them was, why aren't our young men and women in our community good enough to recruit? What's wrong with them? And if there's something wrong here in the community, what can we do to fix it? Spending more money, for library services, ensuring that we have after-school programs so that kids have an option where to go, a safe place to go versus, playing in the street and falling victims to gang violence or being recruited, by a gang. We have seen a lot of really tough times here in our city. From, I don't know how old you are, but you may be too young. It wasn't that long ago that we had a CHP officer that was murdered at the steps of our courthouse. He was murdered by a 16-year-old who murdered him it was a gang initiation tactic. And, his goal was to murder a Pomona police officer. That day, that CHP officer happened to be wearing that dark blue uniform. And, the young kid did not know the difference, between the CHP patch and the Pomona police patch, or didn't see it, and shot him instead. Those are some tragic things, that our community has had to go through. And I think that it is about time that every neighbor gets involved in the business, day-to-day business at City Hall. Public corruption is real, and we can't continue to spend taxpayers' dollars and send them here if they're not being spent on the programs that are actually alleviating the pressure that everyone is under.
Great, thank you, Congresswoman. I know we have a comment from Janeth Rodriguez. She's from Chaffey College. Janeth, you are unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Congresswoman Norma Torres, for providing a space to stand in solidarity with our Black and African community and also our students. My name is Dr. Janeth Rodriguez, and I'm here on behalf of Dr. Henry Shannon, our Superintendent President of Chaffey College. He sends his apologies for not being able to be here today with you. But Chaffey continues to commit and is committed to diversity and equity today and as we move forward. We will be hosting a virtual visual for racial justice and the need for healing for our students, faculty, and staff on Thursday, June 4th at 4:30 p.m. through Zoom. Chaffey College will further expand cultural sensitivity and awareness training opportunities, professional development for our faculty and staff. And we are also reevaluating groups' purposes to align its mission to proactively address inequalities within our campus. I also want to talk a little bit about what the California Community College System has also shared statewide call to action for all community colleges in the state of California. One of the actions includes a system-wide review of police and first responder training and curriculum. And another action includes campuses audit classrooms climate and create an action plan to create inclusive classroom and anti-racism curriculum. Thank you again for allowing this opportunity for us to talk to you. Chaffey College is committed to work with our community partners for a better tomorrow for everyone within our community. Again, thanks for allowing this space and for listening to what Chaffey College is doing.
Thank you, Jeanette. And Chaffey College has been truly a great partner for us as we are working together to address the issues of basic needs for college students, which includes, housing and food accessibility. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Janeth, for those remarks. Next up, we have Jenny Fuentes. She has her hand raised. I'm unmuting you now. Can you go ahead and give your statement?
Hi, thank you, Congressman Torres, for this. I actually would like to give up my minute. My daughter is actually waiting also. She attends UCLA, so I'd like to actually give up my minute. If you could unmute her. Her name is Isis, and actually would appreciate if you'd let her speak.
Isis.
Is she with you or is she on the?
She's actually attending a school. She's on the webinar, and she did want
Isis
to.
Curiel?
Yes, please.
Okay. Isis, you should be live.
Hello, thank you so much for unmuting me, and thank you to my dad for conceding his time to me. Like my father said, my name is Isis, and I just like to say that I do not agree with how this webinar has been conducted. It's been very political and a long-winded PR stunt There's been a continuous disregard for the public's views and desires, and for an officer to put air quotes around a supposed wrongful killing of a Black citizen in these United States is absolutely disgraceful. For him to then compare the trials of, quote, everyday societal issues to the killing of Black bodies is absolutely just ridiculous. Excessive force is real, violation of policy is real, and targeting is real. For them to not acknowledge it is condoning it. I go to UCLA, and right up the street, we have National Guard roaming our streets without proper notification and willing compliance of UCPD. We have peaceful protesters that are being placed in the same vicinity of COVID-19 testing areas. And I would like to feel safe where I go to school, but I would also like to feel safe when I come back to my home in the city of Pomona. It is up to the representatives of my community to speak for the public, and it's up to those in authority to be public servants. We cannot ask these public servants to respect and align themselves with minority and Black communities when the very institution of policing stems from racism and slave policing. How do you expect a community to trust an institution such as this? What are you going to do now to change the corruption and push for equality? Why are minorities being targeted in these arrests while their white counterparts are being led away with a slap on the wrist, if anything at all? Being a college student, there's a great risk for me to go out and advocate for what I believe in, and when my financial aid is put on the line, if I'm charged with anything, it's very disheartening and difficult to navigate. How do you expect me as a college student to be processing all of this, let alone students in grade school who are trying to make sense of this? I have a sister who's in high school who had to just start summer schooling when my professors, personally, I can't say all professors at UCLA, but my professors have been willing to adjust finals and adjust curriculum for these trying times. But yeah, my sister, a high school student, has to start her schooling at summer school and figure all of this out for herself as well. Luckily, she has the support system that she does, but not everybody. So what resources are being provided, and how will these students be supported? How are you supporting this cause personally every day? Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Isis.
It's unfortunate that you feel that this has been, a stunt. It certainly was not intended that way. If there's any services that you need, call my office. Jacob can provide a phone number where you can call. And also, I believe that everyone on this call has been equally outraged. The tape is being recorded. You can play back any part of it where you can hear for yourself. There is a true outrage and upset about what happened to George Floyd. So with that, Jacob, we can take the next.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I know we have a question from Stephanie Clemens, a written question. She asked, how can we get better textbooks that not only acknowledge the impact Black lives have had on our history, but teach it so we can actually have a truthful and well-rounded history? So I don't know if Superintendent Holton is still on the line, or if any of our other panelists want to talk more about education and how it relates to this issue.
I'm not sure if Superintendent is still on. I will try to address your question, Stephanie. This was something that was asked very early on, and I can't remember who the panelist was that asked it of Assembly Member Reggie Jones Sawyer that was on the line with us, to pass a law here in California that would help, that would focus on teaching cultural diversity and Black history, also, I would say, Latino history within our schools and certainly within our high schools. I think it might have been Superintendent Holton who brought up that issue. That's something that I would highly recommend that you contact your state legislatures, to ask that they review that. I will bring that, to my colleagues in Congress to see how we can improve, education to ensure that we have policies, at the very least, that we're teaching our students how to get involved. That's part of what I try to do in Congress, not only in Congress, but at every office that I have served on. I've always had a youth advisory committee to encourage them to get involved. Part of the lessons, the lesson plan that my group gets is that they have to attend a meeting of their choice, a local meeting of their choice, either a school district, a water district board meeting, or a city council meeting, and they have to post it on their social media. We have to bring back that it's cool to be involved in our community and to be a part of the solutions and not just complain. When things don't get done, things that we want to see get done don't get done. Here in California, there's a new law, and that is local control of how our educational funding is spent locally. So the state sends the money, to your school districts. Your school officials are supposed to have open meetings and include parents and teachers unions and students to come up with best ways on how to spend that money, or how to focus that money in which areas. You should be a part of that. You should participate in that. When we were, I was in the state legislature when we were dealing with that law, and I had, I had some concerns about it. I did vote for it, but I did have some concerns because at that time, we had some school districts that were going through some really, really tough times. Recalls of their board members were certainly not stable, but they managed through, and they're supposed to have public hearings, and I know that they're having. How many people from the general public attend those meetings? I don't know. They can't force you to, obviously, to attend those meetings, but you should.
Thank you. And I don't know if Dr. Holton had something to say.
Or if anyone else is on the panel that might want to add to that, certainly.
Yeah, this is Trustee Williams. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, remember, Torres, I wanted you to lift how the young people, if I don't know if now is a good time, but rulemaking and how they could give voice in the rulemaking process. Because like after you pass a piece of legislation, it goes through an administrative process where the public does have an opportunity to, review and add comments before, whatever funding gets to the local level. And so, some of the young people that are on the line, if they understood that process, that is a way that they can influence some of the work that you're engaged in. And then you have an extreme amount of influence on these deputy secretaries that are responsible for federal departments, and having them give their time to help young people and just all people understand how the federal process works, and then the various levers that you do have to get local governments and state governments to do different things. And there are also ways that they can be incentivized. And so I just wanted to lift the rulemaking process for young people to research and to, just learn more about it.
Absolutely. And we can always, if they're interested in learning about that, we're more than happy. If they contact my office, we're happy to post any of that or send them that information.
Great. Thank you, Trustee Williams. I know our next question comes from Samir Al-Alami. I know your hand is raised, Samir. You're unmuted, so feel free to ask your question.
Oh, hi, Congresswoman Torres. I actually had a really specific question I wanted to ask you about, which is there a specific example of any kind of legislation you're going to either introduce or co-sponsor specifically addressing the issue of police brutality? Because as I know, there's a resolution coming, and I know, on the Senate side, there's this very broad resolution coming out, to condemn you know, all these killings and stuff. But if there's not going to be a substantial policy change, you know, it's nothing more than just a sentiment, you know?
Right, right. And look, that resolution you're absolutely right, is a sentiment, right? It is a way for Congress to publicly express how they strongly feel about an issue. And obviously, you know, many of us, not all of us, are very outraged about, you know, what happened with Mr. Floyd. There are several pieces of legislation. Many of these pieces of legislation are not new. They have been introduced year after year after year in Congress, in the House. We are looking at all of that. And I was on a conference call this week with our caucus, and that's the Democratic caucus. We were talking about, because every member of Congress is working on something that is of interest to them. So for example, equipment, military equipment, and how the process of how that is transferred, you know, from the federal government to, you know, our local communities. I've been very vocal on ensuring that if we're going to continue that program, that we have specific training on how to utilize that equipment in a civilian environment, because once it's transferred, you know, to our local police departments, it no longer has the military use that it was intended for. So ensuring that our police departments understand the purpose of it. And now I am looking into clawback provisions. So equipment that is not being, if they do have equipment that is not being utilized properly or has been misused, that the federal government will be able to claw it back. Those are some, you know, some of the things that I'm interested in. They're also looking at training. I've been working, for example, since I got to Congress, on training issues. There is a program, it's called the Flexi program. It used to be a temporary program, and it's a professional school for police departments to, you know, send their staff for training the trainers in different academies that we have throughout the U.S. You know, those officers will then come back and train their other officers, you know, on different topics, on different tactics, different issues. One of the things that I have been looking into is, believe it or not, it sounds really simple, but verbal judo. It used to be taught in the academies, you know, up until, you know, I want to say the mid-1990s. All of a sudden, you know, we stopped teaching that. Verbal judo is a way to de-escalate situations when, you know, officers approach, you know, a person who may be so upset about, you know, a circumstance that they're already angry, that they're already showing a lot of emotion, a way for them to de-escalate the situation. You know, those are all things. We're also working on recruitment, you know, for officers. Today, my office came up with, look, we used to have a teacher, for example, a teacher next door program where teachers were given an opportunity to help finance through either very low interest rates or a down payment to finance a home in the city where they work. We ought to look at that for, you know, police officers, so that they are living in the communities where they're serving. And if your community is recruiting from out of the community or out of state, you know, why? That's a local issue. You know, you should press your local elected officials to do better by that, to revise that, to look at that. We're also looking at civilian panels, you know, for oversight. When there are complaints against a police officer, who is investigating that? You know, if they are investigating themselves, how are they reporting out? There's already a bill that has been introduced in a data bank, something similar to the gang database that that it's a national database that identifies hardcore gang members, and it helps, you know, police departments identify interstate crimes and drug cartels. Well, this is a way to identify problem officers. But we also, one of the things that I'm interested in is looking into, you know, whistleblower protections for police officers that, you know, are courageous enough to report when one of their colleagues is misbehaving. For the most part, you know, most officers conduct themselves, you know, in the way in which they were taught. You know, training. If they're having a bad day, they ought to be empowered to say, look, let me give you an example. Not that long ago, I learned of an officer, a local officer. I'm not going to identify the city here, but the first call was to respond to a traffic collision. The person had been beheaded in that collision. You know, it was, you know, a horrible crime scene or accident scene. It took a long time, you know, several hours to go through and deal with that report and deal with the victims' families. And after that, the next call that officer went to was a suicide call. Now you have, you know, a mom of a suicide young man, and then you have very, very small children screaming, and he had brain matter all over the place. I mean, think about the mindset of that officer. Should they continue to be, you know, to work from call to call that way? Or should we look at that, take a pause and say, maybe you need a day off. Maybe you need to be debriefed to prevent that anger, that pent up anger, just like our community is suffering. These are human beings. And, you know, they have issues too. And I understand we pay them enough, you know, to stand up and be able to communicate with us their own needs, but oftentimes they don't. So those are just some of specific bills that we are looking at. There are many, many more. We're trying to take the next 2 weeks to identify all of the bills that we want to vote on, you know, quickly. Hopefully it'll be soon, but that's the House. The bill process, the way it does is we can vote a bill out of the House. We still have to deal with the Senate, and we still have to have a presidential signature. Now, I know that you probably have followed some of the comments that have come out of, you know, our president, not very pleasant and not very supportive and not very understanding of, you know, the issue that we have here, of the problem, that deep-rooted problem that we're trying to identify solutions for. So stay connected. I hope that you will share with us your email so that we can keep you informed of legislation, and certainly legislation that I introduce or legislation that I support as we move forward the rest of this Congress.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We're going to wrap it up with one final comment. It is from David Angel. David, I'm unmuting you now, and you are now live.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is David. I'm currently a student at USC and a resident of Ontario. And actually, I wanted, if Mr. Ward or any of the other public safety officials are still on the call, I had a question directed at them. So according to the campaign Zero Police Use of Force Policy Report, which I've included the link to that report in my public comment, police departments with more restrictive use of force policies kill fewer people per 100,000 arrests. And at the same time, officers in departments with more restrictive use of force policies are less likely to be killed in the line of duty. Would you all support more restrictive use of force policies that data has shown can keep both the community and law enforcement safer?
That is a good question. I'll tell you that, yes, we do support policies and laws that increase the safety of both the community and the officers that I represent. Last year specifically, Assembly Bill 392 and Senate Bill 230 from California were specific in addressing those things. Senate Bill 230 crafted kind of a framework how all law enforcement agencies in California, how they shall do their policies in regards to the use of force. It's important that we understand the issues that we're having, and that we have to allow a little bit of time for the statistics to surface for the result of both of those bills, with both 392 and 230. And my hope is that that the bills support, or the results of those statistics show exactly what you're talking about, a reduction in use of force and assaults on the police officers. So that is our hope.
Great, thank you, David and Sergeant Ward, for those comments. Congresswoman, I'll turn it back to you if you want to close out our listening session here.
Sure. Once again, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And I just want to say very strongly that we can pass, all the laws in the world. At the end of the day is, behavior has to change. Awareness has to change. And, that is something that all of us can work on and identify, those areas that we need to work on. So today I want to thank you, again, for your voices and for your advocacy today. Sometimes the most important thing that a leader can do is listen. I've never felt more strongly than I do at this moment, having heard your concerns today, not just for myself as a lawmaker or any other specific leader joining us today, but for our entire country as a whole. George Floyd's murder sparked a response that was generated by generations of oppression, injustices in the making. It's up to us to make something of this moment. To truly honor Mr. Floyd's life and his family's loss, we must end this nation's long, sad history of targeting Black and Brown people. And I'm grateful to have you as partners in this effort, and I look forward to working with you every step of the way in this process. For anyone joining who has more to share with me, please know that you can always contact me through my website at torres.house.gov or by calling 909-481-6474. Thank you again. If you go to my website, please sign up for the newsletter so that we can keep you informed on this very important issue. I hope all of you stay safe and stay healthy and continue leading our communities and continue to be a part of the solution. Thank you again. And thank you to our panelists that have continued to stay on this long.
Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Good night.